In this video, I'm going to show you how SlideGen can be used to update fairly simple trackers. As always, this video is designed for you to follow along, pausing and speeding up where you need to. You can download the files that we use by clicking on the link in the description. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the data before we get stuck into the project. You may be wondering what I mean by fairly simple tracker. The main thing to take into account is that when you use SlideGen to map data to a chart or table, you are replacing the entire data for that object, rather than appending a new row or column to the existing data file. This is important because it means that to use SlideGen on a tracking project, you need to be able to ensure that you're able to receive a merged set of data tables with a wave-on-wave comparison, if that's how you're planning on visualizing the data. So you can see here in our first file, we have data for Q1 23, Q2 23, Q3, and Q4. Let's say that you're only ever going to report on the last 4 waves, or the most recent wave. In that case, I would recommend that you ask for your tables to be set up with just the data that you need. That's the same if you're only ever going to report on the last 2 waves, for example. The flip side of that is if the number of waves that you show varies from slide to slide or chart to chart, you may want tables that grow over time. So to show you the 2 different examples that we have here, this is our Q4 2023 data. Our Q1 2024 data can either look like this, where it's showing me just the last 4 waves, or it can look like this, where it's showing me all 5 waves of the project. For the purposes of the training video, we'll start with files that only contain the last 4 waves of data. If you're planning on running a tracker with a file that grows over time, I'd recommend booking a one-on-one session to discuss that further. So let's get into the platform. We'll start by creating a new project. Let's call this Tracker Training, and we'll call it Q4 23. And then from here, we can add our slides. So if you haven't already, this is your opportunity to go and download them from the description. And for the purposes of this video, select all. And then in the data sources area, we'll just upload using the Questa new parser. And to begin with, we just want to upload the Q4 2023 data. You can forget about the Q1 2024 data for now. Now, so that this video doesn't get too long and repetitive, we'll just use slides 3 and 4 for the main training, and then you'll be given an opportunity to jump forward to the report refresh section. I will go through and map data to all of the other slides as well, but if you want to skip ahead, that's totally fine. Let's pop down to slide 3. This one is a bit of a pain because the data is all coming from multiple tables. Right now, SlideGen has a one-to-one relationship between object and table. So I've had to add individual text boxes for each of these data points. We'll do the first one together and then I will speed up the rest of the video so you'll be able to pause and go through the others at that stage as well. So let's do the first one together. We want to bring in unaided awareness for wild roots. Which is question 1A. And we just want the percentage for wild roots in Q4 23. And then aided awareness, which is the next question down, Q1. Same thing, wild roots. Consideration. Just be careful here, you want Q3 rather than Q2. So select Q3 and the 50% for wild roots, and then purchase, which is question 2, 13%. Now you want to do this for all of the other brands, so feel free to pause the video. I'm just going to speed up the video at this point. Now, you'll probably agree that that was a bit painful, but it'll all pay off when we update this with our Q1 2024 data. When we switch the data, all of these data points are going to update automatically, and we won't have to go through and do any of that again. What I do want to do though is just also map the base size. That will again also update when we refresh the data. And I want to bring in the question text for each of these as well. So if we start with Q1, and then we will do aided, and then consideration, and lastly, purchase. There we go. So we've got all the question text below as well. So that slide is done. Jumping down to slide 4, I'll actually talk you through the whole slide because we're going to layer multiple transformations on top of each other. First things first, let's map the data for question 1A, unaided awareness. And what I want you to do is get rid of filter frequency row. We don't want the base size to be included, but we do want all of the columns and all of the rows. So we've selected all of the columns and all of the rows. This isn't exactly how we want to present the data. We do need to perform some transformations to make sure that, firstly, we are showing only wild routes and the top 4 competitors. And by the top 4 competitors, we mean the highest scoring competitors in the most recent wave. And also, we want to make sure that the wave on wave is in the rows rather than the columns. Right now, our rows are the brands and the columns are the dips in the data. We want that to be flipped on its head. So we're just going to do a couple of things with the data transformations. We are going to firstly sort the data from high to low based on Q4 2023. And then we are going to filter text by search to remove anything that starts with the word none. We don't want none of these to ever appear in our top 5 there. We want to make sure that it's only showing us the actual brands. And we also want to make sure that wild routes is always included. So we want to pin, using anchor labels, our wild routes row to the start. And then we are going to trim the data set to take it back to just the first 5 rows. So wild routes and its top 4 competitors. And there we go. Now we have wild routes and the 4 highest competitors for Q4. This still doesn't look quite right though. We want the rows and the columns to be the other way around. So we need to switch rows and columns. That's essentially transposing the data frame. That's looking a little bit better. The only issue here is that Q4 2023 is on the left-hand side and Q1 2023 is on the right. Logically, that doesn't make sense. So we just want to switch those around using the reverse on the rows. Perfect. That's looking much better. That's exactly how we want to visualize the data. The only other thing that might be quite interesting here is to perform a significance test. So if you jump down to visual transformations, you can test between the rows using an analysis type of previous data point. And in the visualization settings, let's choose these thicker arrows. We'll leave the colors as they are and hit apply. And there we go. We've now got each data point is being tested against the previous one. So this 18% is being tested against 32. And then this data point is being tested against 18 and so on. And that's the same for each of the rows. So pretty complex chart there that we've been able to achieve by uploading the data using transformations, data transformations and visual transformations to achieve the effect that we're after. The other thing that we want to do is just map the base sizes. So wave 1 is 1002, or wave 2 is also 1002. Wave 3 is Q3 2023, that's 1005, and wave 4 is 1003. They don't quite line up in here. The visual representation of this chart isn't quite right in the platform, but when you download it, they're going to be lined up perfectly with the data labels that we've got there. The other thing is just to map the table name. And the reason we're mapping this rather than typing it in is because we're going to use the repeat function to repeat this slide for aided awareness, consideration, and purchase. So those are all mapped now. And all we want to do is hit repeat slide and just check Q1, Q2, and Q3. Hit OK. And yes, we had to do quite a bit of work to get that chart as we want it, but we didn't have to do it again. We were able to just repeat that for the additional question types that we want this slide for. If you want to jump forward to the switch data section of the video, that's absolutely fine. For those of you who are finding the additional information about transformations useful, feel free to follow along while I run through the remaining slides. Okay, so for those of you who are still with us, let's jump down to what is now slide number 8. This is our brand metrics section. And we're just going to go through these charts one by one. These are individual charts that we have here. We're going to touch on the copy data transformation feature, which is pretty cool. So let's start with wild roots. And the table that we want to use is called, what is it called? It's just called wild roots. So let's select that one. And we just want the Q4 2023 data. That's all we're showing in this slide, but we just need to make sure that we're removing filter frequency row. Add that in. Now you want to do this for all of the other brands and all of the other brands on Q9, including wild roots again. So go through and do those one by one. You can pause the video here. I'm going to speed up the video. All right, so once you've mapped all of the different brands, what we are looking for is the brand metrics to be ranked from high to low, and then we want to pin the none of these answer option at the bottom. So we're going to use data transformations again to sort the data by Q4 2023 descending, and then we want to use the anchor labels. It's already at the bottom, but when we switch the data for the next wave, there's no guaranteeing that none of these is going to be the lowest percentage again. So we're doing this just to cover ourselves for future waves. We're going to take the none of these answer option and pin it to the end. And then for summits, if we were to just sort from high to low on Q4, the answer options might actually end up in a different order to wild roots. We want to make sure that the order is exactly the same, even if that's not the high to low order for summit. So we're going to use something called copy order and select the shape to copy the order from, which is going to be this wild roots shape, and sort the rows. Now these two charts are linked from now on. So if we happen to change the order of this chart for some reason, let's say we use the drag and drop reorder functionality to move durable to the top. If you watch the chart summit behind when we hit OK, both of them are reordered in exactly the same way. And again, if I just delete that, if you keep an eye on the orders here, they both pop back together at the same time. So they are linked from now on. Here, we can just go through that process of copying the order again and again and again, but we also have this copy data transformations functionality. And if I click that, I can select my target shape, and it's just going to apply the exact same transformations from one shape to another. So if you had 15 different transformations being applied on one chart, you can copy them and apply them all, the exact same transformations, to another chart as well. This is quite simple because it's just one transformation. I think there's an example coming up a little bit later on that's a little bit more detailed, but let's just go through and do that on all of the other charts. You have to make sure that you have the shape selected that you want to copy from, and then you select the shape that you want to apply that to. And you can do that across slides. So I've just copied the order of summit again, and I can apply that to this new chart on wild roots. And I'm going to do the base sizes as well. So just reload the last table and select 103. Okay, jumping down to brand statements. This one's a little bit different. We are essentially, if you click on the chart here on the top left-hand corner, these are individual charts. You can see here I have 2 rows of 4. So selecting the table in the top left-hand corner, we are going to use the summary table at the very bottom of our list, which is Q5, to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement. This is a top 2 box summary table. So it contains the net agree summary for all of the different statements. If we make sure that we deselect filter frequency row, we can select all of these answer options here. And then we just want to select the exact same data for all of the other charts as well. Feel free to pause here. I'm going to speed up the video. And then in the data transformations, I'm going to filter this text to keep the row that starts with Wild Roots makes clothing and hit OK. The only other thing here is I know that my answer options are going from the most recent wave is on the left-hand side rather than the right-hand side. So I just want to reverse the order of my columns. And now they're the right way around. So rather than doing that one by one on each of these, the best thing to do here, or the quickest way to do it, is to copy the data transformation again. This is going to make everything a lot more manageable. The only problem is we're just ending up with the same chart, the same data in all of these charts. So once that's done, you can click on a given chart and edit the filter text. And you might find it useful to have the tables open, but I will talk you through this as well. So we're just editing the text on this one to camping gear. Hit OK. That's our new statement. Move to the next one. We want Wild Roots gives back. Then we want Wild Roots is a brand. And Wild Roots clothing is designed. Moving on to the next one. Wild Roots clothing is suitable. Wild Roots are. And Wild Roots reclaim. I'm just going to map the different base sizes as well. And then just jumping down to the last slide. This one's pretty simple. We are going to take the individual statements here. So we want the statement Wild Roots makes clothing that is both practical and fashionable. And we're going to map the actual statement to the top. And then down here, we're going to map the question. So we'll do question first. And then the statement separately. And in the chart itself, we will reload that table and we will select everything, but use our transformations again to filter text by search to remove anything that starts with net. And then we will switch the rows and columns and then reverse the columns. And of course, reverse our rows. Perfect. And then from there, we can just map our top two boxes as well. So I want Q1, which is on the right-hand side here, is the 81%. The same with the base sizes along the bottom here. And that's all mapped. We just want the same slide for all of the different statements. So rather than having to do all of that again, we can just repeat and pick the remaining statements and hit OK. There we go. That's all of an individual slide, one for each statement. Done. Welcome back to those of you who skipped ahead. This is where we're going to see the huge value for our efforts so far. Let's assume that we have just finished infield for Wave 5 or Q1 2024. Rather than having to do all of that work again, we are going to make use of the switch data feature to populate the deck with the latest information. Before we do that, I always say it's important to start by duplicating the project so that you always have the original setup to fall back on. So going into our projects area, I'm just going to hit the duplicate button, select OK, and go into the new version, and we'll just rename this Q1 24. And then all we need to do now is jump into the data sources part, but I'm going to select a chart or a slide where we might see some obvious differences. Okay, so this one that was a real pain to populate, we mapped each of these individually. Let's keep in mind a couple of these numbers, maybe 30, 86, 50, 13 for Wild Roots. So if we go into data settings, we are going to upload using the question new parser again. And we want to upload the data for Q1 2024. Now, right now, nothing has happened. We have literally just uploaded the new data file. You can mix and match across data files. So the reason nothing has happened as yet is that you might be working on a project where you're pulling data from 3 or 4 different files and updating a deck with those 3 or 4 different files. But we also have the option to take an original data source 1 in this case, and use this switch data function to essentially replace the data behind the whole deck. So the data source we're going to select is this new one, Q1 2024, and we just want to check the compatibility before we're doing anything. Remember these numbers, so 30, 86, 50, 13. If we check compatibility, there are no compatibility issues. We just want to hit perform. Again, in the compatibility report, we only have compatible things. We don't have any issues. So we can hit OK. And our data is now updated. So before we had 30, 86, 50, and 13. We now have 31, 86, 48, and 10. Our base size just happens to be the same. So that hasn't changed, but it has pulled the base size for that. All of these other numbers will have been updated. All of the transformations have been reapplied, and the SIG testing has been applied as well to show us whether there are any changes versus the previous wave. All of these different charts have been updated with the latest version of the data. So all we have to do now is download all of our slides. And for this wave, in less than a minute, we have our new report for Q1, all complete, all updated, giving you more time to focus on digging into the insights and the story.